When you look at the endless delay to Brexit, what do you think comes next, and what kind of pointers would you give to the government right now? Do they just need to surrender to Parliament, or can they still find a way forward?
It's very difficult. The extension, in a way, the 6-month extension to Halloween pleases no one at the moment. It was longer than the Prime Minister wanted. It was shorter than a lot of groups in the UK wanted, because it comes right at the end of the party conference season in the UK, which could be quite tumultuous, possibly with a challenge to the Conservative leader. So what should the Prime Minister do now? Well, she's still going to try to get her withdrawal agreement, the divorce agreement with the EU, through Parliament. She's still having talks with Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the opposition, but there isn't a lot of incentive on either side to get a deal. And we know that the Labour opposition is very suspicious of being dragged into anything that seems to be supporting the government deal. And they really don't want to be captured or trapped into, as they see it, supporting, for example, another round of votes in Parliament where the government and they would agree to be bound by the outcome, but that might mean that MPs got behind the Prime Minister's deal finally, and Labour would be obliged to support that. So there's a lot of unease on either side. We know that the Prime Minister is going to want to try to bring her deal back to Parliament, and she's saying to MPs, look, you can have all kinds of visions of the future, but you have to get this divorce agreement through, or those talks about the future don't get started.
Brexit has been pretty shambolic. How can the UK actually repair its reputation?
That is a really good question. I think when it is done, and Brexit will have to be done in some way, either we stay in or we leave, then the UK, first of all, needs a stable relationship with the EU. That goes without saying. Then it comes back to economic growth. I think, you know, a good part of Britain's reputation has been based on its economic growth of recent years. And then it needs, I think, in my view, a migration regime and a foreign policy that don't shut out the world, that really say, look, Britain is trying to forge its ties with the world. And it needs to manage this whole process so that it doesn't have the accident, if you like, of losing either Northern Ireland or Scotland from the United Kingdom. Because if there's one thing that could make Britain even worse in the world's eyes, in my view, it would be either of those two parts making a successful bid for independence, or in the case of Northern Ireland, reunification with the Republic of Ireland.
Bronwen, you've been a very thoughtful student of all this and the history of all this and the view forward as well. I want to go back to your Westminster School, which goes back to 1560 and Henry VIII. Is this business as usual for the United Kingdom? This day after day after day parliamentary battle? Is it just another battle along the continuum of Britain, or is there something different this time?
I would say that this is, in a way, business as usual. I'm not one of those who think the whole Constitution is broken. The British Constitution has been a very flexible thing. As we all know, it's not codified in the way the US Constitution is, very carefully written down. And I think we have a political crisis. We have one that could lead to a social and economic upheaval. But in my view, we don't have a constitutional crisis. The mechanisms, Parliament challenging the government, the two of them in a tug of war, this is the way it is set up. And it is, in a way, the UK's version of the balance of powers that the US Constitution has, that the Parliament can challenge the executive repeatedly. And there have been many instances of this through history. So I wouldn't rush to say the whole system is broken. What is new, though, is that the big old two parties, the Conservatives and Labour, that have been there for pretty much a century, are fracturing deeply inside themselves. And part of that is Brexit, but part of it is divisions that go within the country. And what we're seeing is that the UK is now, it's a big, complicated country with a population heading for 70 million, lots of different kinds of people, different regions with their own very separate identities. And the question for any politicians, any party, is how you speak to all of that. And we may be looking at a future where you get a much more complicated political scene.